Welcome, welcome everyone to the Switch for Good podcast. I am Dotsie Bausch along with my fabulous co-host Alexandra Paul, and we have quite a treat for you guys today. We have on the podcast Marc Pierschel. And Marc is a German documentary filmmaker and a dedicated advocate of the plant-based movement. He is a self-proclaimed vegan and straight edge since 2000. And Marc's films explore both the history and the need for plant-based eating in relation to the planet, the animals, and also our society. He's truly a plant-based pioneer, having founded an online vegan shop in 2002 and writing his own vegan cookbook in 2009. And his most recent film, The End of Meat, which I watched for a second time last night, is currently on Netflix. And you guys, it is a must-see. He's also an active cyclist, which I can't wait to chat about a bit more. So, Marc, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us. And good evening in Germany.
For having me.
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast.
Good. So, gosh, maybe we just start from the beginning, which is always a great place to start, right? You as a filmmaker know that. I'm wondering, growing up, did film play a role in your life growing up? Did you enjoy documentaries from a young age?
Good question. I don't think I watched too many documentaries when I grew up. It was more Hollywood, classic cinema, the kinds of series that we didn't have too much. It was just like 3 or 4 channels at the beginning when I was growing up, and then private television started in Germany, so there was a different program after that. But yeah, I was always a lover of films and
Did you grow up in East Germany or West Germany?
West Germany.
West Germany. Ah, okay. So there weren't. When did private television come in? Just out of curiosity.
88 maybe.
Right when cable started coming in here.
Yes.
So, Marc, what was the beginning of your vegan journey? Did you start out as a vegetarian?
Yes, I was a vegetarian for 4 years, and then I watched a documentary called Baraka, which has a scene where there's male chicks being debeaked and then sorted, and I didn't know much about that at the time when I saw it, and back then when I saw the film there was no internet, so it was a bit difficult to find out more about that. But then I did some research and eventually I turned vegan.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
They think that, well, I'm just eating eggs, so there's no death involved. We know there's suffering, but they don't even know there's death. But actually, with the egg industry comes the killing of male chicks, because if they're not needed, they don't lay eggs. If they're not needed, so they're just crushed they're thrown into a crusher and
Alive.
And you were just talking about debeaking. I suddenly went to killing. Hold on.
It's just more of the revealing of the truth, but
had both.
The
Okay.
documentary had both, debeaking and then the sorting.
Yeah. Okay.
So explain the debeaking process for those that aren't have any idea what you just said.
Yeah, so debeaking is meant for the egg-laying hens so that don't peck each other. So they use a little heat device and they basically burn their beaks, and then that's at a very young age and without any
Anesthesia here. Yeah.
And what we need to say is that hens don't go around necessarily pecking at other hens.
Right.
It's only because it's so crowded where they're kept in these factory farms that this debeaking needs to happen.
Same idea as why there's so many fights in prisons for humans. I mean, you go insane in that little tiny place that you're in for your entire,
So you were vegetarian for 4 years?
Yes.
And tell us about, was that difficult in Germany at the time? And when was this?
I went vegetarian when I was 17, so at the time it was pretty easy because my mom was still cooking for me, so I didn't have to take care of getting into that. But then when I went vegan, she was like, no, that's it. You have to make your own meals. And then eventually I got exposed to a lot of different foods, which was great because I had to cook for myself and learn to make all these dishes. And there was this whole different world of foods that I had no idea was there, because I was just limited to my few vegan dishes that I was known or I used to have on my table every day. But yeah, it was. And when I went vegan, it was 20 years ago, so it was a bit more difficult than today. There was that many products around, and there were hardly any restaurants where you could eat out. So, yeah, but it's
well, you
so
came a
much
long
more
way
easy now.
because you've written a cookbook, so you did your mom proud.
But what is straight edge? I don't really even, the definition and how does it play a role in your life?
So yeah, straight edge is basically a used subculture or a subculture in general that comes from the punk hardcore music, and I was involved in that subculture, and I grew up around a lot of drugs and alcohol. So I saw a lot of my friends have problems drinking too much, and when I used to go out on the weekends, was always getting very drunk. So when I got into the music, I found these people who were enjoying themselves without any drugs, and that was really something else. And then I said, well, I don't actually need alcohol or drugs in my life, and then that was 20 years ago.
So that is the straight edge movement, and it is not partaking of drugs and alcohol, but sex, promiscuous sex. It's also known for what I read was promiscuous sex. I think that's probably a judgment call, but it doesn't disallow sex, so there's no celibacy, right?
No, just the promiscuity part of it. It basically originates from this band called Minor Threat, and they have this song where they talk about respecting women, so not just having one partner after the other just for,
fun,
the sex part of it and the fun part of it, where there's no substance in it, basically.
And then where does so it sounds like it's an interesting contrast, the punk movement, but within it, because originally you think of punk as crazy. And here's a part of the punk movement where it's actually mature but still delivering a lot of passionate music. Where does the veganism come in? Because that's also an area of straight edge.
Yeah, well, the movement originated in the early 80s, and then it was always very politicized. So these bands were not just thinking about straight edge, but also about the kind of problems around them, the kind of political problems they were interested in. And veganism and animal rights became part of that. And there were the so-called vegan straight edge bands, so bands that were vegan and straight edge and very outspoken about that. For example, a band called Earth Crisis, which was very popular in the 90s. And yeah, that was really something a lot of my friends got into veganism in the first place through hardcore and through straight edge. And that's how I got into it as well.
So you founded Roots of Compassion pretty early on, right? How long ago was that?
That was in Australia in 2002.
Okay. And then tell us about that and how it has evolved with the rising popularity, obviously, of plant-based eating and veganism.
Well, the basic idea was, I was pretty new to veganism at that time, and the idea was to promote the message of veganism and animal rights. So we were wondering what could we do, and we just started printing our own T-shirts and making little badges with messages on them, or animal rights, veganism messages. And we went to shows and to protests, and we were selling them. We were handing out leaflets and making vegan cakes and cupcakes, and so just being out on the street and supporting the idea. And then it grew from there, that we had more T-shirts, we had added literature, we added films, all that kind of stuff, so people could easily inform themselves and have all these messages, so they could say, hey, this is why I'm vegan, or this is what I care about.
Yeah, it's a really terrific site. You sell a lot of things on it, and but it looked like it was European. Are we from the United States able to buy from there?
No, it's international. You can order from anywhere.
Oh, you can. Okay, great. Yeah. So you're a sociology major, and so in you communicate about how you inspire your films, trying to inspire viewers to go vegan. What do you use in your sociology knowledge to inspire people? What are the tactics that you feel are important?
Behavior change specifically.
Yeah, in terms
that's
of
a difficult question.
Well, it seems like your movies, certainly Live and Let Live and The End of Meat, they give a vision of where we could be.
Hmm.
And your next project seems to embody that too, where we could be instead of staying in the muck of this is horrible, this is torture. Is that from perhaps your sociology?
It's just maybe trying to understand different groups or different movements of society, and that was how I really got interested into subcultures, and that was something when I started making my first film, Edge, that was the subculture I wanted to explore more, so all the different facets, the history, and what motivates people. So I think it's a mix of sociology and psychology, but it definitely helped making films because I have a better knowledge of how society works to a certain degree,
Mm-hmm.
or at least I hope so. But yeah, that's how it started for me.
Well, how do you then, if some in your personal life, do you have any kind of tactics that you use to encourage people to go vegan? Because so much of your work, your books, your films are all to inspire. So there's it seems to be a through line.
Well, I've it's just my personal experience as a vegan that I think the best tactic for me is leading by example, just showing how easy it is and how tasty the foods are and what the negative sides are, but not in a negative way, just like in a positive way, helping people to see that, see behind the curtain and helping them to transform their lives or their diets.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to go into your film. I'm going to kind of work backwards because it ties into what we're just talking about in terms of getting people excited about the movement is certain one aspect of that would certainly be the economics of it. And from what I learned from your film, you interviewed a few different people. One of them was Jan, who's the owner of Vegans in and around Berlin. I'm sure there are many of them now. When I was there last year, I went and spent 3 hours inside because it was just so extraordinary to not have to read any labels. The entire grocery store is vegan, and then upstairs there's a shop with vegan bags and vegan shoes. But he said that the plant-based space is growing 65% faster than the tech sector, which is pretty mind-blowing to everyone. It was to me. I knew that it was growing, and we know Beyond Meat had its IPO this year as well. What kind of opportunities do you think that we are facing economically in a future where we don't produce animals and use them for food?
I think there's tremendous growth opportunities. I mean, the idea of the end of meat started in Germany when classic meat-producing companies were making vegan and vegetarian products, which was, to me, who had been a vegan for over 20 years, was something really new and really crazy because those were the companies that we were campaigning against, and now they were making vegan products. So I think that was because they discovered that there's a market, and we see that with the growth, there were more companies adding to that, and now there's even, that's the IPO of Beyond Meat, and there's more investments in this plant-based meats and also into cultured meat technology. So I think there's a lot of growth. I don't have an exact numbers, but it's a huge opportunity for a lot of companies and investment funds.
Do you have a gut feeling of a date in mind? I know that we always like to talk about by 2040, this is going to be the case in 2050. Like in all the work that you've done and all the people that you've interviewed in all your films, do you have kind of like that secret date in mind that you're feeling like could be the end of meat?
I don't, unfortunately.
Tomorrow.
I mean,
Okay.
I hope it's soon. I hope it's really soon because time's running out on a lot of subjects. But I mean, it made me making the film made me more hopeful because I got to know this whole field of biotechnology and all the companies working on these alternatives and how far they've come and how soon or how far these products have come. So that made me really positive regarding the future,
Right.
and a possible vegan future.
So we were talking about the future, but your film Live and Let Live explores the history of veganism and why people go vegan. And actually, when I was researching for this show, I actually joined the Vegan Society because I didn't know much about them, but from you, I learned about how important they are in terms of this modern vegan communities. Can you talk a little bit about the history of veganism?
Sure. Well, it started all in the UK in the wartime. I think it was 1943. I'm not exact on the date, but it was basically a splinter group from the Vegetarian Society, and to them, to the group around Donald Watson, vegetarianism at the time wasn't going far enough because they wanted to eliminate milk and eggs and honey from the diet. So they were thinking about different words and how to or kind of term to use, and they've had really, if you look into it, they've had really funny words thinking about that they wanted to use, but then they just took out the middle part from vegetarian and coined the term vegan, and that was a long time ago, and it was really difficult at the time because it was wartime. And I don't know how they managed to set up the Vegan Society at that time, but yeah, that was the birthplace of it, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, and it was purely ethical. It was not for health reasons, ethical reasons, and they started it. And I found the part of their mission statement, which is the principle of the emancipation of animals from exploitation by man. And then they changed it to seeking an end to the use of animals by man for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and by all other uses involving exploitation of animal life by man. So, that was really...
The timing is really interesting because I know that just after, right in the wartime and just after the war, that was the birth of factory farming as well as a stopgap to feed people. And then, obviously, it was successful economically, and so then it was just in Europe, and it came over here to the United States, and now we know what we have on our hands now. But so that's fascinating.
So the factory farming started in Europe?
Right in the wartime. So veganism and factory farming right around the same time.
That's an irony, but that first Vegan Society meeting apparently only had 6 people in it, so they were small but mighty. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I just remembered the word, one of the terms they had, one was beaux mangeurs, so it's French for
beautiful eaters.
Nice, beautiful eaters, yeah.
Beautiful eaters. Oh, beaux mangeurs. That's great. Yeah. Well, we're vegans now. We're not beaux mangeurs, and thank God, because a lot of people wouldn't be able to pronounce it. So you have a production company called Blackrabbit Images. What's behind that name?
I'm a rabbit dad, so we have 4 rabbits living in our garden. So we have 1 black rabbit, so the name was kind of... came from that.
Okay, great.
And it's just me, so there's no big production company.
Behind it all. Seems like there is.
We won't tell. So you've written a cookbook and also a how-to book on how to become vegan. Let's talk a little bit about that, how to become vegan. What are the tips that you gave in that book to folks that you can share with our listeners who might be becoming vegan or their friends might want to become vegan?
Let's say for us here in the States, we're at Thanksgiving, okay? We've got to go to Thanksgiving dinner with a big dead bird in the middle of the table. And that's tough for us, but we're there because we want to be with our family and we love them and we want to sit around the table. What might be a conversation starter of why you're not eating part of the dead bird?
That's probably not something I would start. That's probably something that the other people on the table would ask that question. So because in the book I tell people not to talk about that kind of subject at the dinner table because it mostly ruins the experience for everyone.
Right. Sure does. The other folks get defensive because they have the turkey on their plate.
You're not going to preach, but if they ask the question, if it comes up, if somebody brings it up,
well, that's a good point though. Don't bring it up at the dinner table
if it's not brought up to you.
Yes. Okay. Maybe people can.
You're right.
So
yeah.
Remember that, Dotsie.
Okay. You're just walking the walk because there's obviously that's not on your plate, so they already know. Don't.
So you're saying let them ask us why we're not eating the turkey.
Yeah, and I would tell people to friendly tell the person who's asking to talk about it after dinner when there's more space for that kind of discussion and it's not really in front of the food.
So don't go on a long diatribe about how unhealthy it is and how cruel it is. And so all the people having the turkey feel terrible and defensive.
Not effective.
Okay, yes. I agree. I think that's very smart and hard for a lot of people, but very smart.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's just that, I mean, I kind of live in a vegan bubble, but when I get into that situation, it's always very difficult to see a dead animal on the plate when other people eating it. So it's a very tense situation in the first place. So if I had to talk about it at dinner, I think I would get very emotional and might not be the best response to some people.
So just to learn, because I've been in these situations, why aren't you eating the main course, not just at Thanksgiving, but other places, and something very simple and easy. Animals are my friends and I don't eat my friends. Like what's just a kind,
because if you say you're
calm,
vegan, if you say I'm vegan, America, at least in America, I don't know how it is in Germany or the rest of Europe, please elucidate us, but vegan is like a dirty word. Vegans are more hated than, apparently they're one of the most hated groups. So if you say I'm a vegan, that's kind of inflammatory.
Yeah,
in itself.
that might not be the best.
Really, is that still the case? Do you feel it changed over the past few years, or is it still difficult?
I think it's still, there are more of us to hate, but I do think there's still quite a lot of animosity over vegans. Some people use the term plant-based for that reason.
For sure. Yeah.
Is that not the case in Germany?
I think it got way more accepted after the mainstream kind of picked it up, and how it got popularized was through the health aspect. There was a time, 5-6 years ago, when there were a few cookbooks that came out, and they were all about the health benefits of veganism. So all the talk shows, all the magazines on TV picked it up, and there were vegan challenges, and that really helped to get it into the mainstream. And even friends I have who were outspoken carnivores, they suddenly bought vegan cookbooks, and I think now it's just really accepted, and people feel okay eating vegan or trying out vegan. So that was something that was unheard of before.
Do you have a term in Germany that's plant-based, or do you just use the term vegan?
Well, there's a term for it, but we don't use it, so it's vegan, yeah.
I like the term
Call
vegan,
it what it is.
But Dotsie prefers plant-based, so we're a
what I
mixed marriage
personally
here.
choose and what I talk about more often because it's more pleasing and I feel like people are more open
exactly.
is I'm all about
You're
vegan,
more tactful than
but
I.
I've seen people tense up when you say the word, and they don't tend to do that when I say plant-based, and so they're a little more open. They want to have the conversation. They're more curious. They don't shut down. So any way that we can have people not shut down is the way in, I think.
No, you're totally right. You're totally
well, I'm not saying that because I'm right, but
No,
that's the reason I tend to use it more often.
Yeah. So any other advice to talk to people who ask, why aren't you eating the meat?
I found it really interesting to turn around the question. So I asked them, what's the reason why you're still eating meat or eating animals?
Oh, and what do they mostly say?
Because I like the taste, or I could not eat that. I couldn't eat cheese, or I couldn't eat.
Couldn't give up.
Yeah.
Give up.
And I tell them, well, there's all these alternatives. Have you tried this and have you tried that? So that's a good starter.
Yes, I have read that you believe that the way to a meat eater's heart is through the delicious food of veganism. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think food is the best argument we have.
Yeah.
Good food.
Yeah.
Good vegan food.
Straight to the taste buds and the full tummies. One of the main themes, there are a few, but in your film, The End of Meat, is the intersection of ideological, political, and economic business of meat. Can you speak to where the three of those crossover in society?
Yeah, well, basically, that's how I start the film. Basically, an introduction on how factory farming evolved, and that there was this formation of the animal industrial complex. So there were these agricultural companies that were copying the techniques from the automobile industry. So from the Ford, the what's the line? The assembly line, basically. That's how it got popularized, and then we see all these companies that have grown with the industry. So we have all these feed suppliers and the fast food industry coming into it, and we see this entanglement with politics today. There's a lot of lobbyism, and that's basically the whole animal industrial complex.
How interesting that they copied the automobile industry in that. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it makes sense. How do politics play a role in that?
Oh, just through there was a lot of clearing of land necessary just to feed the animals and to have grazing lands. And the person I spoke to in the film, which is a sociologist called David Nybert, and he says that was a lot of Native Americans were driven away from the lands just to clear the land for pastures and to make way for feed. So that's something that relates to the U.S. specifically. So I don't know how it was in other countries, but yeah.
So just like akin to what we're doing today to the environment in clearing the Amazon rainforest to make room for cattle to graze. And correct me if I'm wrong, in your film, I think you said we've cut down 70% of the Amazon.
Yep.
So there's 30% left. What do the environmentalists say and the environmental science say when the other 30% is gone? What's going to happen?
I think that's just really bad, of course, for all the animals and the biodiversity that is still intact in the remaining 30%. And then, of course, it has devastating effects on the climate because that's basically where a lot of the CO2 is stored in these green belts in other rainforests, not just the Amazon, but yeah.
Okay. How does the movement compare in Europe or specifically in Germany, if you prefer to talk about that, with the United States in terms of just acceptance and number of people and the foods that are available?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's difficult to compare because the U.S. is so big, and then it's so different going from city to city and then to the rural countryside. So I think it's similar in Germany, but Germany is much smaller. So I think it's the availability of foods is just really big right now. All the supermarkets have the basic vegan foods, and then now even more. So. And all the restaurant chains, same thing. So I don't know how it is in the rural U.S. area right now, but when I was there a few years ago filming, it was quite difficult to be vegan in certain places.
Yeah, so in larger cities, it's much easier to be vegan than it is in the Midwest where, well, it's hard to even be a healthy eater in some of the places here in the United States. So, I mean, you could be vegan in the middle of our country if you eat a lot of Oreos and Lorna Doones.
Yeah, I mean, in food deserts, it's certainly hard to have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and grains even. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know if I'm just deeper into it, and I'm just so much more relaxed about how to find the food and where to find the food. But I find nowadays it doesn't matter where I am in the U.S. I mean, you can find something anywhere, and the conversation is definitely going in the middle part of the country. Like now, when I go to restaurants, the waitress or the waiter, they know what I'm talking about. They know if I say the word vegan. Whereas 10 years ago, I mean, I got some strange looks like that. That wasn't even a word in the English language.
Or it was vegetarian,
right?
and vegetarian meant you ate fish.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's the blinders are coming off. People are aware and open to it, and when you are a server, which I used to be in college, your goal is to please the customers. And I find that people are really nice. I mean, they want to help you out. They know what you're talking about. So they help you go through the kitchen and say, okay, you can have this, and this on the menu, and what they have back in the kitchen they can make you that's delicious. So I don't know. I feel really hopeful.
Good. In your cookbook, your vegan cookbook, do you have a recipe that is your favorite? That has that's either very easy to make for people like I, or very yummy?
I think one of the benefits of the cookbook is that all the recipes are very easy to make. That was something people have told me, that's because they like it. And then all the ingredients are really cheap as well. There's no expensive kind of stuff you can't find anywhere, or you have to order from the internet. So it was basically the first recipes that I tried out and I put together for people to have as an introduction to veganism. And I think the most favorite recipe is the pizza.
Oh, good.
Pizza? Yeah.
That's great. So you have a pizza in there. Excellent. It's going to become very popular over here then.
And the chocolate cake, but it's only in German, so it's English.
All right, so don't get too excited out there. You can't actually make it. All right, we got to get that translated. One topic that I want to broach on before we go. I don't think very many folks recognize, I know I didn't until I went deeper, that animal agriculture itself is one of the largest perpetrators of human rights. And I learned recently that most of the tanneries that we have, which are the treatment plants for animal skins in order to make the chair or shoes or a jacket, are in India. And the statistics show that 90% of the people that work in these tanneries do not live past the age of 50. And it's very specifically due to the toxicity of these chemicals that they treat the animal skins with. And we kill over 1 billion animals a year for their skins alone. People think that the meat industry and the skin industry is one. No, it's a completely separate industry. Those are a lot of animals. I think that you're the perfect person to speak to kind of this worldwide injustice, because you really dealt with it in parts of your film anyway. Can you speak to, I don't know, maybe even give an example or a story of some of the people that you met while making the film that talked about this human injustice issue happening inside of animal agriculture?
Sure. So we talked to Timothy Patcheret, who is a political scientist, and he went undercover in a slaughterhouse, and he wrote a book about it, which is called Every 12 Seconds. Mm-hmm. And it's basically his account of how a slaughterhouse works and what he experienced while working there for 5 months. And I have him in the film because he tells a really powerful story of how, you've seen the film, of how he works there, and then cows break out from the slaughterhouse. Was it from the slaughterhouse down the street? And then they get into an alleyway, and the police can catch them, so they shoot them. And so they watch this from their lunch break from the slaughterhouse, and all the other workers are disgusted by that, and they say that it reminds them of a person shot in Mexico, I think. And then they just continue going on with their work, and they continue to kill, I don't know what it was, 2,000 something animals for the remainder of the day. I think it's just a really powerful story, and it shows you that when we hear these stories of animals breaking out of the cycle, then they become individuals, and they get named, and people don't want the animals to be killed, so they want them to be rescued, and they get to sanctuaries. But all the other animals, they're anonymous basically, and people accept that they're there to be killed, basically.
Yeah. And then they but when they're in the slaughterhouse, they're the workers who were so defending the individual then forget that what they're doing. They turn off their brain to recognize that each of those cows that come by on the hook that they have to kill is an individual.
Yeah, and that's because basically all the steps in the slaughterhouse are separated, so everyone is doing this one job, and they don't feel like they're killing or they're responsible for the killing of the animal. So there's no certain person that is responsible themselves. It's just a
Yeah, it's like all segmented in your brain, right?
Yeah, you know, but that's
Yeah.
interesting because on the factory floor of a car, the workers, because my husband Ian's from Michigan and his father and his brother both worked at Ford, is that there's a sense of pride that you actually put in, you know, you did the steering wheel in the car. There's a sense of pride from that. So it's really, I guess, your perspective and how we choose to perceive it so that it benefits us and keeps us as whole as we can, right? As we move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, my friend Marcel, who's also in the film, he's a sociologist, and he on the first thesis he did interviews with slaughterhouse workers and how they justify doing what they do. And I think one of the main reasons or one of the main arguments from them was that they have to feed the population, they have to feed their country, and that meat is a central part of that. So they feel pride in that, doing that. So.
Yeah. I often wonder, and I don't know because I haven't had to work in a slaughterhouse, but it feels to me like the violence that wherever the violence is on the line, which is maybe every step of the way or maybe just in the actual killing of the animal, that we know that one activity or feeling or emotion tends to beget another one of that same like compassion begets compassion. We say that all the time. And I imagine violence begets violence. And I feel very curious about if they are able to leave the violence at the slaughterhouse or if the violence goes home with them and into their families and their children's lives.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think there are a few studies where there's the link of people who have abused animals in their past. They are more likely to abuse humans as well. But I think there's been some criticism on that study, so I'm not sure. I don't want to say something wrong. But it's definitely an interesting connection, yeah.
You're a documentary filmmaker. You've made terrific documentaries about promoting plant-based diets and lifestyle. What documentaries have inspired you?
Good question. I think there's a few.
Well, we know Baraka, of course.
Baraka, yeah, that was. It's especially inspiring because there's no dialogue in the whole film.
Right.
It's
I
just.
saw that film. It was
You
beautiful.
did.
I don't know.
Write that down.
I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I have.
Okay, and there's also a follow-up film called Samsara by the same director, and it's just really powerful to see these scenes of either nature or society or just human inventions of how they work and how people move along with society, and it's breathtaking at times, and it's really powerful just with no dialogue. And as a filmmaker, I know it's really hard to make a film without dialogue. So. And inspiring documentaries, I think for me, what's really inspiring are personal stories. I mean, I like statistics, and I know statistics can be powerful, but I think personal stories are even more powerful when people really are telling something that really touched them and has changed their life, and that's something I try to include into my films as well.
So are there any that you come to mind that you can recommend to our listeners? Did you see Earthlings? A lot of folks, the number one documentary that, and maybe it's because it's been out for a while, but that when I say, how did you turn vegan? If it wasn't something like Forks Over Knives or What the Health on Netflix, it was Earthlings. Did you?
I haven't seen Earthlings. I never got around to watch it because I heard from other people that it's just a lot of violence, and I can't see that anymore because I've seen a lot of it, and I don't really know what's behind it. So, and it's something in my films I try to avoid that, showing animal cruelty, because I think for a lot of people they don't want to see the film if they know there's animal cruelty involved, and instead I try to tell the stories of how people experienced something like that and how it changed them. I think that's more powerful.
Got it.
One of doctors that we've had on the podcast, Dr. Jim Loomis, when people come to him for that are in a health crisis and are wanting to know how to get better, and they ask about documentaries, he says, if watch Forks Over Knives, if that doesn't work for you, watch Cowspiracy. If that doesn't work for you, watch Earthlings. And if that doesn't work for you, you need a different kind of doctor. so true, right? You really could make it through all, especially the last one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what's next for you, Marc?
I'm just wrapping up production of my own new documentary, and it's about the first animal sanctuary in Germany. And I've been following the two owners and all the animals around for 3 years.
Wow.
And it's basically about their biography, because Jan, he was also in Live and Let Live, and he's a farmer. He used to be a dairy farmer, and then he just couldn't find the right way to behave or treat the animals the way that he wanted to. And so in the end, he stopped being a dairy farmer and opened this sanctuary, and now there's 45 cows living there, all different kinds of animals, and it's just a really nice story. And I wanted to tell the story of how it is to live on a sanctuary, and to get new animals when they arrive, tell their stories, and then also tell the story of what happens when animals die at a sanctuary, and how it changes visitors when they go there, or all these big and small stories.
I love how your films so often talk about how we could be and give us hope and give us a vision for the future. It makes total sense that you don't want to dwell on what the atrocities that we're doing now, but instead of who we could be. So thank you for that.
Oh, sure. I think it's just a nice argument to show the positive aspects of something like veganism, and that we don't have to point necessarily to the negative sides all the time, and that we can have this as a great argument to show people what's possible if we go vegan or plant-based.
Yeah. Where can people find you before we hang up? We mentioned social media earlier, but like on Instagram or Facebook or your website, or they want to learn more about you or get the recipe book that's not in English, but maybe the Germans are listening, so they want to get it.
It's I'm on Facebook and Instagram under Blackrabbit Images, and you can find The End of Meat on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under The End of Meat.
Okay.
And the website is theendofmeat.com, and the film's out worldwide, and you can find it on Amazon Prime in the U.S.
Great. Okay. Oh, that's where I watched it last night. It wasn't on Netflix. Okay. Sorry, I misspoke. Amazon Prime. Thank you so much, Marc.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Cheers.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.